Hello, my name is Jason T. Ingram. I live in Oregon, at least at the moment, and I go by the artist name of Fake Zappa. And I'm doing a series about my life living with mental illness. And for the last several months, I was living on the road. I had my house rebuilt after a fire, and I've only done two videos. I really should have done one every week. Every every week there was joys, there was fun stuff, there was adventures, there was meeting interesting people, and there was also some major setbacks and challenges and outright disasters that I had to face mostly alone. And it was a really painful time. And I think what's going on now is that a lot of things are getting done, some very pressing things, and um, I'm burned out. I'm just simply exhausted. So I've spent the last 3 or 4 days just getting as much sleep as I can and really trying to get my strength back. I was feeling all powerful here lately because I really got inspired to take additional action and basically speak my truth about some situations that happened over the last several months that made things unbearable for me and should have never happened. And part of the reason why I'm doing that, of course, for me, it's definitely empowering to speak my truth because in the past, when I did, I would get hurt. And now when I speak my truth, I get hurt. I get hurt very bad. And a lot of times I regret it. It's just that I've reached a point in my life where I can't stay silent anymore and I can't be ignored anymore. It's like an allergy to it. And so I'm feeling this need to speak up for myself, stand up for myself, and try the most peaceful solution I can without doing harm to anybody, unless, of course, the situation creates that as a result of me just speaking my truth and saying, hey, this is how this made me feel. This is how this incident caused big issues in my life and caused my body to get sick and symptoms and my mental health to get out of control in various degrees. And it hasn't worked. It's just that if I stayed silent about this stuff, I wouldn't be able to live with myself anymore. That's where it's gotten in my life. And I'm still giving myself shitty haircuts. But it's part of the fake Zappa thing, although I did stop shaving and getting my fancy mustache and soul patch because I haven't really done any like public stuff. I did do a recording session in the new house a couple weeks ago with a guy, the only guy who's been actually airing my music and featuring my music, not only my band, but now some other projects too. He's interested in playing on his queer radio. And so, wow, that was like the first session I did since the house burned down. And then I did a session here about a week ago where I played my partner's cello that we were fixing and stuff that he's never really even learned, but I decided to get on. It was very therapeutic. And I did a minimalist piece on this cello, and that felt very empowering as well. And of course, the biggest thing is starting a new relationship and how scared I've been of men because of what happened to me in my last relationship and other experiences that make it very hard for me to trust people, especially men. And so I've been happy. I've been really unusually happy considering everything that's gone on. And, the older I get, I'm 45 now, it seems like I demand an awful lot of respect, more respect than I think anybody is willing to give. But, it does feel good to at least make it known that, hey, people that are in a place of influence, they seem to get this much respect. I think I should get that same amount of respect too. And when it comes up in conversation, or sometimes I volunteer the information, but not very often, about my house burning down, and especially about my illness. But it does come out because people will eventually ask me how I make my money and or what I do. And people on disability, they usually just talk about their hobby that doesn't make them any money or very little. And they say, this is what I do. And they don't go into like the main point that, I get monthly checks from the government, and that makes me a bad person in the eyes of most people that I talk to. So what's helping me about speaking my truth is that I get these comments every now and again from other men who feel the same thing. But it seems like when it comes to bipolar depression and other things like this, most of the people that are speaking out are women. And I appreciate that because we've had millions of years of women not being able to really speak out about much at all. And I think that's admirable, especially when it comes to all this trauma that's coming up, like the sexual trauma that's been triggered by a lot of women, and they're starting to speak out and feeling empowered. But I also feel men are feeling empowered to speak out about how we're treated as people living with debilitating mental disorders. And it's scary to go out into what I say the real world. If we're spending a lot of time in, let's say if we live in like a single occupancy type situation with other peers, and we get out of that bubble, it's pretty scary if we don't have someone there with us to advocate for us, or at least knowing that if there were an incident that we would have somebody to advocate for us. And the world's been a pretty scary place for me. It's not necessarily losing control of my temper. Most of the issues that I deal with is simply running away from a situation where I needed to stay and resolve things, but knowing that it was only going to cause more hurt than I'd get away from the situation. But that would only cause more depression, more anxiety, more hurt, resentment, which would lead to out of control self-harm behaviors. And losing control of your will is scary. And I try to tell this to people that are trying to understand living with mental illness. It's very much like any other illness. If somebody has a disease that makes it almost impossible for them to walk, then we don't just keep telling them, well, just keep crying harder, put one foot in front of the other, you'll walk. Look, I can walk, I've been walking. And I was in a cast for a while, and I got the cast off and I started walking, and I had crutches, but those are crutches. And I just threw them off and thought, I don't need these. I'm just going to, people don't say ridiculous things like that to those who are paraplegic. However, I get a lot of ridiculous things that are said to me from people that are high functioning, that might have suffered with some acute mental disorders or situational things like grieving over the loss of a loved one, and that being a form of depression or a seasonal depression or something like that, that still enables them to be able to have a job, a house, and a family, and all those privileges that high-functioning people have. So what happens with me is that I hear this stuff from high-functioning people most of the time, and after a while, I can't take it anymore. And I try in the best possible way that I can. And it doesn't really matter, because most people have already made up their minds that, okay, this is somebody who talks and acts mostly like me, therefore they must be as high functioning as I am, and they're saying that they have some kind of mental illness. Well, don't we all? We're all crazy, but this person gets money from the government and I don't, so this person must be committing fraud. And these things go on in the back of their head, and it's not necessarily something they're going to verbalize. It's just that they start asking me questions, and they start treating me in different ways as if I'm somebody who's in a class of social existence somewhere between the working poor and homeless. What's sad about it is that I'd like to work, and you just can't tell somebody that, because they're like, well, great, we'll go get a job, And I had some intense bigotry that happened here lately with somebody who was teasing me about getting a job. And I tried to confront this person. And the ironic thing is that this was an individual who is one of those holistic health type practitioners. And during a session, I even mentioned about, okay, the holistic community, a lot of these New Age practitioners, a lot of these people, you would not believe it, how much bigotry and how much misunderstanding there is about the mentally disabled. And it was like, oh, no, we're not bigots. We're the affirming and tolerant people, And wouldn't you know it, within a week, this individual was mocking me. And I've talked a lot about bullying because bullying is such a big deal these days, especially trauma and basically just people feeling unsafe. Especially women. It's just that when men say, hey, I feel unsafe in this situation, it's almost laughed at. But the thing is that if we make men feel safe who don't feel safe, wouldn't that have an effect on violent crime? I think so. I really think so. And so I love it when I hear conservative rednecks that are on the opposite spectrum of my political views, and they talk about gun control being more of an issue with mental health stuff. And I hate to agree with them, but they use this term and they call it the failed mental health system. And I sit there and I think, well, if anybody knows whether it's failed or not, it's somebody like me who's in this position where I'm too high functioning, that I don't require a payee, I don't require 24/7 care, and I don't require at least some kind of monitoring. And I'm not functional enough to where I can just go in and hand somebody my resume about what I'm qualified and experienced for and get a job. I don't have those privileges. I don't have the privilege to be able to advocate for myself, to find the right kind of care, no matter how hard I try. That's a privilege that some people have, and that's a skill that some people have. And a lot of it has to do with it's simply not available for those of us who are in this in-between zone, who are on Medicare, and that limits getting adequate care from most providers. And I end up getting cheap mental health, which most of the time it doesn't work. And if it ever becomes counterproductive, which it has in recent months, then the only logical reason is to find other resources. And the best resource that I found is a peer-to-peer phone counseling service that is done here in the state of Oregon. And I called them up yesterday, and I thank them every time now lately, because I say, you guys actually provide a substance here. It's something legitimate, and it's helped me more than any other organization that does any kind of work in mental health. And I am so grateful for that. And I do have a couple of friends who are these, which is funny because it's weird how many people are scared of me, and I'm way more scared of them than they're scared of me, because who listens to me and who listens to them? What's my history? What kind of harm have I actually done to people? And if you just kind of do the math sort of a thing, it's like, whoa, I am way more afraid of some of these people than they could ever be of me, because of what they're actually capable of doing and getting away with. That's the big thing. But anyways, you would think that if I did have friends, that they would be these thuggy, aggressive people, and that I would be hanging out with a bunch of mean men. Although I have a couple in my life that are. But I hang out with a couple of older women, and they both suffer a lot. And we just relate, because for some reason, if I don't look like I'm suffering, and believe me, I have learned how to hide my symptoms in order to survive in the world of higher functioning people, because you're darned if you display symptoms because it scares people. You're darned if you don't display symptoms, because they will deny the right for you to suffer. And I mean, not denying your right to suffer, but your right to have that suffering acknowledged. And that is very important. When people refuse to acknowledge how much you suffer, that's one blow. If they refuse to acknowledge how much you've accomplished, that's another blow. If they also refuse to acknowledge that you didn't end up some kind of statistic, like some kind of addict, then that's another blow too. So it's kind of like this. There are people that ignore other people that need attention. There are a lot of people that give a lot of people attention that already have a lot of attention. The more attention somebody gets, it goes viral, like these videos and songs that get played millions of times. So what we see is a principle of the rich getting richer, the more popular getting popular, and then it's the opposite effect for those that aren't heard. And I've noticed that people that are ignored, they get ignored even more. And it gets to the point when they're treated kind of like a rat in the kitchen. I'm going to fix that rat. That's what I'm going to do. I don't want that around, but it's a survivor and it keeps coming back. And I kind of feel like I am some kind of pest now, that I have to be the squeaky wheel in order to not be ignored. And it's really hard for me, because I'm the type that I'm so scared to offend people. I've always been that way. Although, just me walking to a room, offends some people. Just being gay just really freaks out a huge number of people. Not so much where I live now, but I tell you, just because of my disability status, that offends people, because, well, they can't see it. They can't see how much I suffer, and they've already made up their minds how much they think I can suffer. But it really does hurt when, when I meet people, because I've met a lot of people on the road here lately, and it's really, really intense when I feel like I'm not allowed to suffer as long as people can see it or smell it or whatever. So I haven't made a lot of these videos lately because they haven't been happy. And even though I'm happier than I've been in a long time, I have a lot of very unhappy things to talk about. But I hope, if anything, it can get people to relate to people like me and what we really go through. Or it can, reach out to other guys who are like me, who, for whatever reason, are afraid to say it. And believe me, I'm afraid to say this stuff. I just before I did this video, I was having really weird stomach aches and nausea, which just rarely ever happens for me. So I think, well, if something is that scary, and if it doesn't harm anybody to speak your truth, then speak your truth.